This is Earl Nightingale with Insight. I received a most interesting letter from an Insight subscriber. He's a dentist, a periodontist, actually, in New England. And he writes, Dear Earl, I've been listening to your audio cassette programs over the years, and I want to compliment you on your dedication to quality. Your Lead the Field program is one of my favorites. I've recommended it to numerous friends and colleagues and have given copies as presents to various people. I wanted to tell you how one of the messages in Lead the Field, titled Acres of Diamonds, has profoundly influenced my life. I think you'll find the story interesting. I'm a periodontist. About 3 years ago, unfortunately, a disc in my back ruptured, and I lost several months of work. During my recuperation, I walked long distances every day, and when I walk, I'm able to do some creative thinking. I had listened to Acres of Diamonds many, many times, and was constantly aware of a certain passage in which you discuss the fact that one can find the opportunity one's always wanted in the field of endeavor one is presently working in. He goes on to write, in the tape you said that this opportunity would not be obvious, but would be hidden in common everyday garments, just as was the hairpin with which someone fashioned the first paperclip, or the dirty drinking glass which triggered the paper cup industry. I must have listened to that passage several hundred times, and I knew somewhere in my practice that opportunity was lying dormant. Then one day, while I was on one of my walks, it hit me. I got the idea of developing a plastic, disposable, color-coded periodontal probe to replace the standard but archaic metal probe long used by dentists throughout the world. It took a little time for the idea to gel, but after meeting with many plastics engineers and then spending many thousands of dollars and 2 years of work trying to find a company to market the probe, it now appears the enterprise will be successful. It already is in some ways. I have a patent pending. I own the trademark, Periotest, and I sold the whole project to the Block Drug Company, which now has plans to market the instrument on an international basis. Assuming all goes well and I receive my patent, then I will have substantial royalties. The project is still in a developmental stage, but Block is expecting to have the product marketed sometime before the end of this year. They're very excited also. So, Earl, I just wanted to tell you how valuable your tapes have been, and especially Acres of Diamonds, with that particular phrase, hidden in common everyday garments. Thanks. The letter is signed, Best Personal Regards, Dr. Bernard Lowenthal. Well, it so happened that at the time I received the letter, I was seeing a periodontist for some minor work, and I showed him the letter. He read it with great interest and said he thought the plastic, disposable, color-coded, sterilized probe was a super idea. He went on to say that he would certainly use the probes. And I'm happy to be able to update Dr. Lowenthal's story for you. I'd written to him requesting permission to read his letter on Insight, and when he wrote back on June 20th, he also had some wonderful news to share. Dr. Lowenthal writes, I'm pleased to tell you that I now have obtained the patent. I was just notified. The Acres of Diamonds message in my Lead the Field program, we now have the new Lead the Field program, is about an African farmer who, upon hearing stories of the diamond discoveries in Africa, sold his farm to go look for diamonds. The man who bought his farm later discovered that the farm was covered with diamonds, and according to the story, it became the world-famous Kimberley Diamond Mine, the most productive diamond mine in history. The moral of the story is simply that before we go rushing off looking for greener pastures, if you'll permit me to mix my metaphors, we should creatively give the pasture we're in a thorough going-over. And I pointed out that in every kind of work, without exception, there are wonderful opportunities awaiting discovery. Ray Kroc could have been satisfied to operate that first hamburger stand in suburban Chicago, but he saw the larger opportunity, and the worldwide McDonald's is the result. Then there's the story of Stu Leonard. He's another Insight subscriber, as a matter of fact. Stu Leonard was a milkman with a home delivery route when he saw the opportunity inherent in a food store specializing in dairy products. He now has the largest and most successful retail dairy store in the world in Norwalk, Connecticut. Well, I could go on and on telling the stories of those of us who saw great opportunity lurking in what might seem to others an ordinary job. Now, the same is true, of course, of the work you're now doing. There are ways to improve upon what you do. Nothing is as good as it can be, as it someday will be. But opportunity doesn't wear a little sign saying, hey, look at me, I'm an opportunity. I saw a motion picture on television recently which depicted H.G. Wells, the famous novelist and historian and inventor, inventing a time machine with which he traveled from the turn of the century into our present time. Everywhere he looked, he saw the astonishing improvements that had been made over a 90-year period. There were hotels, sure, but incredible, massive, mind-boggling hotels like the Hyatt Regency in San Francisco. Motor cars were everywhere, but what vastly improved motor cars. Elevators, like rocket ships, moved up and down on the outside of buildings. Everything he had known in his world had evolved into so much more. Well, everything we work with today will evolve into so much more, something so much better. The best book or advertisement has yet to be written. We need to move from a dependency on fossil fuel to a hydrogen economy. How can we do these things? What's going to happen in the world when the pollution gets so bad in Mexico City, it's no longer possible for human beings to live there? It's almost that bad now. We were recently in Athens, Greece. It's the same there. How can we clean it up? And our own choking cities like Los Angeles in the bargain. We need better writing instruments, better cars, better health. There are areas of the world in which heart disease is virtually unknown. They don't even have heart specialists. Why is heart disease the #1 killer in the United States? How can we reduce the incidence of cancer now reaching epidemic proportions in certain areas? We know a man, Dr. Mark Sorensen of the National Institute of Fitness in Ivins, Utah, who says heart disease and most cancers can be avoided through better nutrition. The same is true, he says, of adult-onset diabetes and other common degenerative conditions. After a few days or a week or so at his institute, people often throw away their insulin and hypodermic needles. They don't need them anymore. There are men and women in every facet, every labyrinth of human society who are working on problems, solving problems, working to make things better, developing new and better ways to do things. And all of us, every day of our lives, are in the presence of more abundant opportunity than we could develop in a lifetime. We need to turn back the clock and look at things with the eyes of creation. As creativity expert Roger Von Eck says, it isn't what we don't know that keeps us from being more creative. It's what we do know. It's our mindset. It's our habitual way of looking at things. It's seeing things as they are instead of as they could be, as they might be. It's seeing that same old empty lot as an empty lot instead of the site of a beautiful new building. I've said it many times that all of us need to set aside a think time, a time when we can quietly doodle on a notepad and question things, when we can ask ourselves, how can I make it better? How can I do a better job of serving our customers? How can everything be rearranged in a better way? What would this be like if it were smaller, larger, a different color? Any person can come up with good ideas that will make things better. I was watching a man the other day. He was in his late 60s and working for a large company. I said to myself, I wonder what he has done to make the world a better place. I wonder how many ideas he's come up with that helped his company do a better job. Or has he just been a rider? Has he simply spent his years sitting in the back of the truck with his legs dangling, going along for the ride? Who knows? Only we can really know, each one of us, how well, how productively we've spent our time during our individual holidays on Earth. There's so much to be done. There's such a great need for the contributions of each one of us. And as the story of Dr. Lowenthal, who invented a better dental instrument, proves, there are opportunities in our daily work. They're there every day, just lying in wait. But remember, they're wearing everyday garments. They don't look like opportunities until you start looking at them in detail and turning your mind loose at the same time. I came across some interesting tips on leadership, and I felt they could be as important in getting along with the members of our families as they are in managing people in business. See what you think of them. Remember that the other person's interests may be different from yours. Respect them always. Know his habits, his likes and dislikes. If his taste differs from yours, remember that you are just as peculiar to him as he is to you. Don't insist on your so-called superior tastes and views. Find a common ground of interest. Share the limelight with subordinates. This inspires loyalty and enthusiasm. Give them credit in front of others for their successes. Stand ready to shoulder the blame for their failures. And privately take the long-term view. Your purpose is to influence others to produce results. Let somebody else do the strutting. Businesses need teams, not just bosses. Be alert to the other person's wishes and preferences in small matters as well as large ones. That little extra makes a deep impression on the other person and wins his confidence and friendship. Let him talk. He will tell you about himself and his problems. As soon as you've discovered what he wants, give as much as you can and explain why you can't give more. Meet once, whenever possible. If the main point is at stake and minor concessions and other devices do not succeed, delay the issue. This gives the other person a chance to reconsider. It gives you a chance to reorganize your campaign, reconsider yourself, perhaps to obtain more facts or to seek someone else's help. Most people hate to yield under pressure, so if you cannot win at the moment, don't lose heart. Time alone has won many battles. Smile and give a hearty greeting and mean it. Don't make an enemy by wounding the other person's vanity. If you do, you've lost a potential friend and possibly made an enemy. A smile costs nothing, but is beyond price. A friendly person is the one who smiles and shows warm human traits along with his merchandise. Cherish the esteem of people with whom you wish to maintain friendly relationships. Protect them from your own desire to feel important. Remember, the desire to feel important is always at work within us. Take great pains to spare others humiliation or embarrassment. Don't throw your weight around. Even if you're right, you may land on your ear. To draw people to you, feel a genuine appreciation of their problems. Let them know about it. Let your employees and associates know that their success and welfare are a matter of personal interest to you, and mean it. Good organization demands a two-way flow of information and understanding. Put the other person in your place, and occasionally put yourself in his. Handle each person differently, take into account his special interests, the things he does well, his wants, and his capacity to think and do. Well, there you are, some how-tos for leadership. A company's progress and success depend on its management, its leadership, and the same is true for a family. There are a few subjects more important than the study of the art of leadership. You know, as parents, we have no idea as to how far-reaching our influence is on our children. When a child is born to us, we take on an 18-year job, at least an 18-year job, because by that time, let's face it, the kids are pretty well on their own. As a rule, we can begin this job with no background or training whatsoever. We're as unqualified to be parents as it's possible to be. We think of all the mistakes we believe our parents made in raising us, and we resolve not to make the same ones. During the early, vital, and formative years of our youngsters' lives, we're as new at the business as they are. We try our best, we read all the articles, no two of which seem to agree. We learn Dr. Spock by heart, and in the meantime we're fully engaged in trying to succeed ourselves. In those early years of marriage, the husband and wife are knocking themselves out, trying to demonstrate to themselves and to each other, and to their parents and friends and neighbors, that they're competent and up-and-coming members of human society. They find themselves saddled with 100 jobs and responsibilities they never dreamed their parents had to cope with, but which they did cope, and usually successfully. They have their work, their social life, their friends, their life together. And in addition, they have this here kid, this strange, irresponsible, helpless, unintelligible, noisy lump of humankind that they're somehow responsible for shaping into a productive member of the human race. Thinking back, they realized that in all the years they went to school, there was not a single subject that dealt with raising a child into successful adulthood. They know they're supposed to be model parents. They also know that they're supposed to pay the rent or the mortgage payment. There's the car and the insurance and the furniture and the clothing and the medical and dental bills. In the early years of their marriage, there are so many things they're supposed to do well, and they hope they can get just one good night's sleep with that little stranger in the house who outgrows his clothes as fast as they can buy them and gets them dirtier even faster. And in the meantime, every time they open a magazine or a newspaper, they're admonished about the perils of parenthood. Everybody they know has a different theory on child raising or toilet training, and everybody they know is as confused as they are, and as their parents were when they were babies, and their parents before them, and all parents going back to the days when the human brain wasn't developed enough to make a problem out of it at all. And so what do? They do their best, just as their parents did. They try to make a success of their own lives, as additional children come along perhaps, and one day all the kids are grown. And if during the long intervening years they've managed to keep what they had when they first decided to get married and they still love and like each other, they realize they've been quite successful. They've done a good job, and they set a good example. Nothing worthwhile comes easy. Marriage, living, child raising, working, succeeding. But if we're conscientious and do our best, one day at a time, it's sort of amazing how well it turns out. And now, it's their turn. And heaven help them. Someone passed on to me an article written some time back by Ardis Whitman. It's titled, "What Do You Mean Normal?" And in this article, I think Miss Whitman makes a very important distinction, and that is that if we're to be the best we can, normal must not mean average. For example, it is in the normal nature of things that no two human beings on Earth are exactly alike. So the word normal should not be confused with the word average. If you leave your fingerprints on something, you might just as well leave your name and address. No other human being on the face of the earth has the same prints. You hear music and see a sunset differently from any other person. You might enjoy a book that would bore your wife or husband. You might like lots of people around, and your spouse might like it a lot better when there's just the two of you. When you say, I want my child to be normal, you don't mean average, and you shouldn't. What you do mean is that you want your child to grow up as a distinct individual, a part of society to be sure, but with his or her own abilities, talents, likes, and dislikes. So to be normal is not to be average, it's to be different. We may think we know everything about our friends and neighbors, but we don't. We don't even know ourselves that well. How can we expect to know others? The smiling small talk and the sharing of small intimacies with our good friends does not reveal our true selves, nor does it reveal theirs. We present one face to the world as a rule, and another one to ourselves. There must be millions of people who feel inadequate just because they're not like what they think they see around them, and half the people they see and talk to feel the same way. They're not inadequate at all. It's just that they've never really understood themselves enough to realize that we're not supposed to be like anyone else, because no one is. We're supposed to be ourselves and realize that we're distinct individuals. As Artist Whitman points out, what's normal? Take a look at the great ones. Socrates one day stood for hours in the snow, oblivious to wind and cold, working out a timeless problem in philosophy. Churchill calmly walked into the bedroom of a president of the United States with only a towel draped around him. Einstein apparently could go a whole lifetime without giving a thought to whether or not he needed a haircut. Are these people normal or abnormal? They're normal. That's the way they do things, and that's normal for them. I'm sure there are lots of people who are keeping themselves from something worthwhile they'd like to be doing just because they think they're being normal not to do it, because none of their friends or acquaintances is doing it. The truth of the matter is that they would be normal to follow their own natural inclinations, since no two people are alike, and they're being abnormal in copying their friends. If you try to conform to the crowd, you're not conforming at all, really. You're making a mistake. You're trying to act like people act on the surface. It isn't you, and if you really knew the people, you'd find that what you thought they were like might be a far cry from what they're really like. What's normal for you, for me, is not easily discovered. It's not a question of being adjusted, being average. It's not found by looking around at other people. It's found only by inward searching, by the knowledge of who I am, not by the knowledge of what my neighbor does. Each of us is outstanding in some way. Every person on earth has a strong point, an inclination, a talent, even hidden genius for something. Being normal is finding it out and enjoying it. And when we find it, life takes on new meaning and excitement. And when we develop this ability, our friends will frequently say that we're different from the general run of people. Of course we're different from the general run of people, and so is every individual in the general run of people if he or she only knew it. Sometimes you'll hear someone say when he looks at someone else, I wish I were like him. Balderdash. You're just looking at that other person's strong points. You have something he doesn't have. Find out what it is and develop along the lines you were intended to develop. When you've done this, a lot of other people will wish they were like you, but they shouldn't. Being normal is being what we are as individuals. It's a fact that each of us is a mystery and a miracle. What a shame it is to try to paint over the miraculous mystery of ourselves a likeness of someone else. To be normal is to be ourselves, and never average. The study of English is probably hated by more children than any other subject. They find it tedious and boring. They feel that they already know how to get along with their language and see no reason to delve into the origins and intricacies of proper English usage. So they slip by. Since most of the other kids hate English too, it's almost like belonging to a kind of club. In an item in American Educator magazine, Van Ajamian wrote that in today's world, poor spelling, grammar, punctuation, syntax, and vocabulary have seen the floodgates opened, and we are now drowning in the waters of confusion. There is so much change being legitimized in our language that it's a wonder why English is being taught at all in school. Take, for example, the comma. Ajemian went on to say the comma should be the pause that refreshes. Commas also create useful nuances in the language. The more nuances, the more shades of meaning. The more shades of meaning, the richer the language. In refusing to use the comma, we are impoverishing English, and cultural anthropologists argue that limiting language can limit one's scope of thought. I believe that. Hardly a day passes that I don't see misuse of the apostrophe. The apostrophe is used for contractions and to show possession. But the most common mistake, and we hear this most often on local news programs, no, we simply hear it everywhere today, is the one that mixes the singular with the plural, as in, if someone commits a crime, they are going to pay for it. Someone, of course, is singular. The word they is plural. It should be, if people commit crimes, they are going to pay for them, or if someone commits a crime, he or she is going to pay for it. But the word they does not mean or take the place of he or she. They does not mean both sexes, which is the way it's often intended. We don't have a word in English that denotes both sexes, although he is often used in that sense, unless the audience is entirely women. The use of gonna and gotta instead of I'm going to and I've got to or I have to is sloppy and an ugly use of a beautiful language. The other evening I heard a TV newscaster on a local station who was reporting a story about dairy cattle say Holstein heifer instead of Holstein heifer. That's just sloppy work. Newscasters especially should keep a dictionary handy. A heifer is a cow that has not produced a calf and is under 3 years old. Everyone is going to make a mistake occasionally. Over the years, I've made many egregious blunders. English is a large language, and the rules can be complicated occasionally. But perhaps if we all try a little harder, we could do a lot better. Our use of our language, more than anything else, broadcasts the extent of our education. I remember a time when I wanted to cross Michigan Avenue in Chicago while a parade was passing by. The crowds lined both sides of the avenue to a depth of perhaps 10 or 12 people. Parents were holding the little ones up for a better view, and they were jammed in like sardines. I had to cross the street, so I just started. I found that a crowd is made up of individuals, and all you have to do is get by one at a time. I was soon across the street and on my way. It hadn't been easy, but it hadn't been too difficult either, and had taken far less time than you might imagine. It reminded me of the old story about the railroad engineer who started out from Chicago to California. If he waited until all the lights turned green along the entire route, he'd stay in the terminal for the rest of his life. He just took one light at a time. When it was time to start, the first light flashed green, and away he went, and one by one the green lights came on all across the country, and the red ones were turning on behind him. It frequently happens that we fail to begin a big job because of the massive obstacles, real and imaginary, we see in our way. But like crossing the street through a crowd or taking a train across the country, we'll find that by just taking the obstacles and problems one at a time, it isn't too long before we find ourselves with the task successfully accomplished. If two young people in love could see in a sudden flash all the problems and disappointments they'll have to face during their life together, they might decide to forget the whole thing. Fortunately, the problems are hidden from view. If a housewife could see all the meals she must cook, all the dishes she must wash, and all the rooms she must clean during her married life, she'd probably join some contemplative society and spend the rest of her life sitting down. It's the same with anything. Years ago, if I could have seen all the radio shows I would have to research, write, and broadcast for my Art-Changing World program, I might have become a beachcomber. But by taking things as they come, one at a time, we manage to do just fine most of the time. We get into hot water only when we fall behind, when we let one unfinished task pile on another until they form a mountain too large to tackle. Then we can't keep up with the new ones. This is the best argument I know of for doing each day those things we should do, and for doing each day something on which we're working. This is how books are read, bridges are built, children are raised, jobs are finished, and a life is successfully lived. Don't concern yourself with tomorrow's problems today. Leave them for tomorrow. Concern yourself with those things you know you should be doing right now, today. Do them as best you can, and your day will be lived successfully. Put enough successful days together, and you have a successful lifetime. I would nearly go out of my mind when I had to drive in heavy traffic, but I've learned to keep cool with the realization that I'll get to my destination eventually in good time, and all the stewing and sweating and cussing in the world isn't going to improve the situation. You just have to take 1 mile at a time. Someone once wrote something to the effect that nothing in the world will take the place of persistence. I believe it completely. Once you know where you're going, just stay with it. One problem, one success, one day at a time.